Welcome to Parenting Decoded, a podcast for practical approaches to parenting. I'm Mary Eschen. Have you ever noticed that some people, when you give them flowers, don't care? They might even tell you they'd rather spend an hour with you than get flowers. Or maybe there was one time you were sad and you just wanted a hug, but no one noticed, and it made you even more sad. Everyone experiences love differently, and if we can understand those differences with our spouses and our kids, we can really up the love in our homes. I have some great news for you. In this episode, I have an interview with two best friends, Holly and Bec from Australia, who have a podcast that I'm a big fan of. It's named I Love You Too Much to Argue. I had to laugh when I first heard that name. It's so love and logic. They podcast about love and logic, but also cover love languages and the Enneagram personality types in relation to how those fit into family life. In this podcast, I've asked them to go over the basics about love languages and how we can use them in our families. They have 6 kids between them, so they have lots of practical experience with how understanding where each of us finds love can improve the overall love in our homes. I'll put some links in my podcast notes for their podcast, as well as to free online quizzes you can use to help determine your family's love languages. Enjoy this podcast interview. I am so happy to have Holly and Bec here from the podcast, I Love You Too Much to Argue. And Holly and Bec are joining me today in order to talk about love languages and how impactful they can be for our relationships and our families. And so welcome, Holly and Bec.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us, Mary.
Such a privilege to be here with you today.
I am so happy to have you. You're all the way from Australia.
Yes.
That's so fun. I'm glad that we figured out the time differences and everything. And one of the things I have learned about love languages early in my marriage. I've been married for almost 30 years. And it was so impactful. Can you guys talk a little bit in general about what love languages are and what's the point of understanding them for our family?
Yeah, sure. Well, we are really interested in investing in relationships in all aspects of our lives, whether that be with kids or spouses or friends. And so there's a bunch of tools, out there in the world that we can use to help invest in our relationships. And one of those that we're really passionate about is love languages. And when I think about different languages that people speak all over the world, if I want to talk to someone that has a different language to me, I actually have to learn their language to be able to communicate more effectively to them. But it also works when it comes to the languages of love, because everyone has a different primary love language, and that is the language that we hear love the loudest. So if I'm speaking to you, Mary, and your love language is quality time, for example, but all I'm doing is giving you gifts, you're not going to hear love the loudest. It doesn't mean you won't feel love from me, but you won't hear it in your own love language. So we can communicate with people and show them love more effectively by learning what their love language is and being able to love them using that language. So that's why we kind of love the model of the love languages, if that makes sense. But I guess you want to have some definitions around which ones they are.
I do. Well, I love that. I love your example of speaking to people in foreign languages, because that is just so spot on with my husband and I when we learned each other's love languages. Like, you like gifts? I like quality, kind of stuff. It was eye-opening. So tell me, why don't you take us through the 5 love languages?
All right.
That would be awesome.
Okay, we'll give you a quick definition on each of them as we do it. So the first one we'll mention is quality time. So it's actually spending quality time, giving your undivided attention to somebody. The next one would be physical touch. So it's physical contact. Words of affirmation would be the third one. So using your words to actually build someone up, tell them that you love them and encouraging them. Gifts is the fourth one. So that's giving someone a tangible item. Doesn't have to be expensive. It's not about being materialistic. It's just a physical item that you give them. And the final one is acts of service. So that's doing something for someone that helps to relieve a responsibility or a burden for that person.
Predominantly, you would have a primary love language and then a secondary love language. So all of us, as humans, we would need to hear and receive all 5 of them, but you would have kind of like a hierarchy of which one you hear it in the most. So for me, for example, my primary love language is receiving gifts. So if somebody is come to my house and they give me a gift, like Bec will often bring me my favorite type of tea. And so what that says to me as someone whose love language is gifts is you loved me enough that when you weren't with me, you were thinking about me and you know me deeply to know and understand that I like this specific flavor of tea, and you purchased it for me and then brought it to me and gave it to me. And that shows me as someone with a love language of gifts that you know me, that I'm seen, and that you understand me, and that you love me enough to think about that outside of us being together. So that's kind of, how you hear it when someone does that for you. Some things that you can probably look out for if your child might have a love language of gifts. Sometimes, so one of my kids, she always likes to draw little pictures and come and give them to me. Or she will go and collect some flowers from the garden and come and give them to me. Or she'll go into her room and find something that she doesn't want anymore, but she'll wrap it up and then come and give it to me. If you find that your child often will give things to you, even if they're just things from around the home, or even if they're things from the garden, or little pictures that they've drawn, or stuff that they've made for you, that could be an indication that your child has a love language of gifts. So there's some things to look out for. How to show you love your child through using the love language of receiving gifts is by knowing and understanding some of their favorite treats or some of their favorite activities. Because for someone whose love language is gifts, it's not about giving them expensive items. It's actually about knowing who they are. So use the gift that you give them as a token to show them, I know who you are. So buying them their favorite treat, for example. That's something I really love to do with my kids that are, I've got one that likes to receive gifts as her primary love language. And as well as for me, that is my primary love language. So I like to receive it that way too.
You like giving gifts.
You're really
too,
good at that.
Yeah.
I try.
Well, so can I ask a question before we get too much into kids? Like, how did you find out what your love language was?
That's a good question. I think I did the test years ago after reading the book. So if you don't know what your love language is, there is an online test that you can do. And I think it's on the Love Languages website. So there was a guy...
Gary Chapman. Yeah. So he developed the love languages and worked out that these were the 5 primary ways of actually receiving love. So doing the test online is a good one. Reading the book, I think reading about and listening to podcasts about what each of the love languages are and how you can receive love in those ways. I think sometimes when you listen to people's stories, you're like, oh, yeah, well, I really notice when someone does this particular thing for me that it has a bigger impact on me than when, they do one of the other options. Yeah.
Well, so I did the, years ago, I did the test, and I don't even know if it was online at the time, but just a couple months ago after we started chatting, I retook it.
Wow.
And all you have to do is Google 5 love languages test, and you'll get it. So that's really nice to know. It's free. I think you could probably pay for some tests, but there's no need to.
No.
Like, you can just take an online test, so at least you know what yours is.
Yes.
And what did you come out
so
as?
I at the time, years ago, I came out as acts of service. I was a young mom at the time, and all I wanted was some help with the kids or the dishes or the whatevers. I was just pooped.
Yeah.
And so, but it's interesting because I was reading a little bit on the web about how your love languages can change over time. So that was about 30 years ago. And I really feel that my love languages now might be more gifts because I no longer am burdened by having little kids in home that I'm taking care of all the time. So it's interesting how it's like, what are my, quality time is really important with my boys.
Yes.
I want to spend quality time with
Absolutely.
them. I don't care. I actually don't care that much about gifts, but so it's interesting to think about. But I'll let you continue. I'm really interested to know how you guys talked about receiving gifts and how that is reflected with kids. There's the 4 other ones. So tell me a little bit more about those and how they work with your kids.
Okay.
Like that, how did you notice them? Because can you have them take a test or?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, before we get into the other ones, you can actually do an online test on behalf of your child. There's another test that's specifically for younger children.
Oh.
So there's a test that I think it's for like 8 to 13-year-olds or something like that you can do online on behalf of your child, and it gives you some questions that you can answer, or you can involve them if you think that they would be up for something like that. And then,
did you do it?
yeah, we have. Yeah, we have done it. And then there's other things that you can do as well with kids that are younger. To try and help learn what their love language is. If they're into drawing or something, you could say, hey, can you draw me a picture of what it looks like when you feel really loved by mum or when you feel really loved by dad? And depending on what they might draw, might be able to give you a clue as to what their love language might be, or at the very least, give you ideas of things that they want, how they want you to love them. If your child draws a picture of you hugging each other, that might be an indicator. Maybe their love language is physical touch, or maybe they're just craving more hugs in their life, and you could easily provide that. So getting your child to draw some pictures around that, or asking some specific questions like, what does it feel like for you when mum or dad loves you the most? Can you tell me a story about one time when you felt the most loved in the family? So asking them questions like that, not in a way where you're sitting them down and interrogating them, because that won't go well, but just in a natural conversation, maybe when you're driving in the car or walking somewhere or doing another activity kind of together.
Another way we've talked about helping to work out what love language your kids have is to actually spend a week concentrating on one love language and just like showering your kids with love with just that one love language, and then the next week moving on to another one and actually documenting, whether it's physically writing it down or just mentally in your mind, how your kids respond and react to each of them. And you'll often see that it'll have a greater impact on your kid when you're loving them with their love language. Like, they'll love them all because kids love being loved, right? But you'll just see that it hits them deeper, and they hear love the loudest in one particular way.
Yeah, as I was thinking about chatting with you guys, one of the things came up is that I see a lot in the park, if I'm at the park, and kids going, mommy, mommy, mommy,
Yes.
look at me, look at me, look at me. And there's some kids that really need the mommy, mommy, look at me. And I'm sort of like, is that an indication of a love language of spending quality time because they're feeling neglected? But so sometimes I think a parent might guess based on the demands of their child
That's right.
what kinds of things they like.
Definitely.
Like the quality time or the physical touch, always wanting to hug
Yes.
you and cuddle you, and you feel like they're on your neck and head all the time, and it's like, oh, they love it.
That's right. I mean, often you might know or be able to guess what your child's love language is by some of those behaviors. I actually had on my list, one of the examples was, if your child is someone who often says, look at me, look at me, look at me at the park or whatever, it could be that their love language is quality time, or it could be that their love language is words of affirmation and they want you to respond to say, well done, yeah, that's amazing, you're so great, I can't believe you can do that. So it could be kind of in either camp for those things. And I think kids are really actually good at innately articulating what their love language is without even knowing that it's a thing. But if you can be in tune with that and see how they're behaving and responding and what they're asking for. One of my kids, her love language is acts of service, and she'll often say, oh, Mum, could you get me a drink, please? And whilst some parents might think their child will do that when they're feeling lazy, actually some kids are asking for things like that because that might be their love language, and they might feel like you really love them when you do, get them a drink of water, or make their bed for them if they ask, or things like that.
And I think the other thing, other than what they ask of you, often the love language that we have, our primary love language, is how we innately show love. And so how our kids express love to us is also an indicator of their love language. So if you're finding with, the child who's asking you to do things for them, often it could be a sign of acts of service. If they're also wanting to do things for you, like that's just as much of a clue. If they're like, they just go and make you a cup of tea, or they want to cook you a meal, or, it's that not only what they're asking for, but also what they're doing to show you they love you.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because all of these are just forms of communication for your family.
Yeah.
It's like, and if you want to communicate well and understand and love each other, that I just remember when I learned about it from adult to adult with my husband and I, it was just like, oh, I mean, it was so helpful to know that my husband, his was gifts. I was like, I'm not into gifts. I'm into acts of service. And so I was wanting this and giving this same thing because that's what I wanted. And what he really wanted was gifts. And so I'm like, I went out of my way to give him a surprise party because it was a gift to him. And it's like, I hate surprises. Don't you all?
No, I love them.
I hate them.
Surprises.
I hate it. Oh, that's right. Yours is gift. And it's like, I just hate them. So it didn't even occur to me to ever do something so crazy. But it's like, still to this day, we talk about his 40th birthday and we went to Yosemite and his brother came in just special. And he was like, oh my God, it was just so wonderful. But it was because I learned his love language that it made it possible. It's like, okay, I can do this. I'm creative. I can, and same with our kids. Like, gosh, if we can learn that, like one of my sons, he was really loved physical touch a lot, and like, hugging all the time, even if he was like 12, like what 12-year-old boys hug all the time. It's like, and he just likes it. He loves it. And, so understanding that that's not a bad thing.
Absolutely. I think
also really good.
When I first learned about the love languages, I only thought about it in the reference of a romantic relationship. But once I recognized that, it's actually really helpful to know for our kids and for friendships even, it can change the way you use it. For someone who's physical touch, for a kid, you would show love to them differently if it's your child than you would if it's your friend or your spouse. And so I think that's one of the beautiful things about the love languages is they are so adaptable, and you can use the different aspects of them to show love in different ways to different people depending on how they're hearing love the loudest.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe we should get back on track with the other four.
Yes,
how they might show up in kids.
Okay,
I'll let you pick whichever one you think is the next one.
Okay,
all right. Well, I'll go with acts of service, which is my love language. So, as we said a bit earlier, it's shouldering a responsibility or a burden alongside someone is how you would show a person with acts of service the love language. So it's not just doing something for them. It's often with them or helping to carry a burden. I already just said that. So what to look for with kids is them asking for help. We talked a little bit about that before, and them seeming delighted when you offer them help. That delight that comes onto a kid's face when you want to express love in a particular way. And as I said before about them offering to help you. So ways that we could show our kids love for acts of service would be to offer to help clean their room, for example, or noticing when they're actually doing something that maybe they don't love doing and saying to them, oh, could I help you with that? Those are kind of ways that we can do acts of service for our kids.
And how does that segue into the other one that comes to mind is sort of quality time. Like they want us to spend time with them. Is that cleaning the room? Like that could be two different love languages depending on the kid.
Yeah. I think the key with love languages is that sometimes the same activity could be felt in different love languages. So quality time with a child could be cleaning their room, but also it could be sitting and playing a game that they really enjoy playing. So I would say for quality time, it would be joining in an activity that they actually enjoy. So, for example, my daughter really loves playing Minecraft at the moment. And so if I was to, sign up and create an account to join in and participate in Minecraft, not that I have any idea what I'm doing, that would really speak loudly to her if quality time was her love language. Quality time's about undivided attention. So
or sitting down and building Legos.
Yeah, totally.
And not being distracted by
dinner.
By your phone. Yeah. Watching their favorite movie. Yeah. So
okay. All right.
So another one of them is physical touch, and often people would think of physical touch only in like a romantic relationship in a sexual way, but physical touch is way, way, way beyond that. And for someone whose love language might be physical touch, it's about that, that incidental touch that creates connection. And so that might be a big bear hug. That might just be like a hand on the shoulder or a rub or something, or a squeeze your hand. It might be putting your arm around someone. It might just be walking past them and stroking their hair or something. And for kids, when they're babies, you're constantly hugging them and holding them and, creating that affection and that attention with your infant. But not all babies, of course, all babies need and want that, but not all babies respond in the same way to that. You will get some babies who are a little bit more impatient with you when you're hugging them, because it's not that they don't like it, because we actually need that skin-to-skin contact. But you will notice, especially for some people who've got more than one child, you will notice that when your kids were babies, you potentially had one or more that were more cuddly or non-cuddly than others. And I know that I had that, with my kids. And my third child, he is physical touch through and through, and he was the kind of baby who never wanted to go to sleep on his own. He always liked to be wrapped super tightly in his little wrapped up bunny rug. He always wanted to be patted and rocked to sleep, and he would sleep really well if you were holding him, but he wouldn't sleep well if he was just on his own and left quietly. And even today, he's 12 now, and he will always be the first one to come up and hug me or kiss me or, lean on me or like put his hand on me or sit on your lap, when you're on the couch. He just always wants to be like physical, because it conveys that connection. And so I think if you are looking at your kids thinking, I wonder if their love language might be physical touch, it'll be those kids that are constantly coming up to you asking for a hug.
Like I said about my son when he was 12, it was like that's so unusual for 12. But you have one too.
I do, yeah. It does seem unusual, but it's nice. I mean, he will still, like, if we're just doing something at home and we're being still, he'll still hold my hand or something like that, just to have that connection. And I think when you're wanting to show love to your child, if their love language is physical touch, walking past them and just giving them a little pat on the shoulder or a rub, or stroking their hair quickly, or just, even a little squeeze on the arm, just to show them that you are there, you're loving them, and you are for them. Cuddling them, of course, is a great way to do it. But also beyond that, often people that have a love language of physical touch can actually be quite tactile. And so things like fidgety toys or weighted blankets and things like that can actually really be beneficial for them, because they do like that more sensory, that's the way they use their body is more sensory. It's the way they feel the world and experience the world and experience other people. So just having to think about those kinds of things as well for your child might be helpful. Mm-hmm. And then that brings us to the last one, I think, which is words of affirmation.
Yeah.
Which is actually both of our husbands' primary love language is words of affirmation.
You guys practice so that when you go home.
I think it might be like both of our least love languages too.
I think so.
it's a little challenging for
It
us.
is. It is. It's something that I've had to practice
Yeah.
as a spouse. But I think when it comes to parenting, it's a little bit different. So words of affirmation is about using your words to tell someone how much you love them and how much you appreciate them and what you like about them. But it's not just saying, oh, you did a good job. It's actually going a little bit more in depth and saying why you thought they did a good job of this particular thing and what you noticed about them. So when I speak to my husband and I say something like, oh, thanks so much for doing the dishes, that's lovely. But if I say to him, thanks for doing the dishes, when you do that, it shows me how much you love and appreciate me. That to him says a whole lot more, and I'm affirming what he's done, but also telling him how it's made me feel. Then for him, it's just like words of affirmation central. He just loves that.
It's almost pointing out the intention they had behind the action that they've done.
Absolutely.
It's really
Yeah.
I think it really tells them that you see them because you've understood why they're doing what they're doing, not just what they've done.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's the same when it comes to children, not just saying, oh, I love you or good job with that, homework that you've done today, just going into that little bit more depth of, wow, you did a really great job with your spelling words. You must be a really good speller. But then going further to say, you must have put in so much hard work to be able to get it to this point. Wow, I'm so proud of you for doing that and for working so hard at this task. So it's just going a bit above and beyond just general blanket statements to show them that you love them. And when you're, trying to assess whether or not if your child has a love language of words of affirmation, just think about what they say to you. Oh, they might always say, oh, this dinner was delicious, Mum, or thanks for cooking for me, or thanks for dropping me off at school, Mum. If you might have a child who's a bit more free with how they affirm you as a parent. That might be a clue to what their love language is as well. And I think that's all 5.
Yeah, it is all 5. I'm so happy that we could go over all 5. One of the things I saw on the internet, I came upon a little wrap up for those, like, why do you care? You guys have done a really good job, I think, of setting up, like, why should we care about them? But I really thought that I like this idea, and I would love to have your feedback, that it promotes selflessness, because it's really, coming back to Love and Logic land, it's like it promotes people to be thinking outside of themselves.
Yes.
To be thinking well about other people instead of just about themselves all the time. And I think that's so key.
Yeah.
And teaching them empathy, to have someone,
That's right.
Like, oh, that's so interesting that you love gifts and stuff like that. The other one was promoting intimacy, that you know someone like you guys were talking about. And then personal growth, promoting someone from operating outside of their comfort zone. Because like, if you're not a gift giver, if that's not your love language, you have to, if you can teach your kid these skills too,
That's
to
right.
like, mom likes acts of service. What does that look like? Having your kid realize, or maybe that your child understands that you want physical touch.
Definitely.
And that a hug really means a lot to you, or
Yeah.
that what dad likes or whatever. It's like, do you operate in your family, since you guys are very well versed in this? Can your kids use it with each other or with you to help promote those kind of, it sounds like such great family bonding material to be able to think of selflessness and all that kind of stuff. Tell me about your experience with your family using them on each other, maybe.
Yeah,
Besides just you.
I don't know how you would answer that, Bec, but my answer, I guess, would be, you're talking, Mary, about promoting selflessness by using the love languages, and I really love that, because I was talking to a friend a while ago where she was struggling because her partner wanted to be able to love her really well, but was seeing it as an equal, well, I'm going to love you in this way in order to get love from you back that way, rather than just giving in order to love. And I think if you're instilling this stuff into your kids when they're in your home, it really does promote that selflessness. And it's about actually, how can I choose to love someone really well, regardless of if they choose to love me back or not, or regardless of their response, because I can't control their response. I can only control me and what I choose to do and how I live my life and how I love others. And if I want to really love others well, I can use these love language techniques, love language tools to be able to show love to other people in a really selfless way. And I think that for me, that's something that is important in my family and in our home, is helping each other to understand that everyone is different and everyone hears things in a different way. And so if you can understand and know your sibling or your parent or your child's love language, you can actually intentionally give love to them selflessly, and that just actually enriches the relationship between siblings or parents and children or spouses, to be able to have a better quality of family life and a better fun time all together. And I think it helps you understand each other better. My son, whose love language is physical touch, he is obsessed with his older brother. Like, he loves his older brother, but his older brother doesn't necessarily love when his little brother comes up and wants a hug all the time. So it's really helpful for me to be able to say to my older son, I know that that's annoying for you because you don't necessarily like hugs all the time from him, but if you can understand how much it means to him if you were to give him a hug, that's going to be helpful for him to know why that's happening for them in their relationship. So I think it's a really helpful tool to be able to use in your family.
Well, so you could do that with your older son, letting your younger son know. But can you tell your younger son what your older son's love language is? Does it work both ways, or is there kind of an age thing, like when they're 16 or 18 or something like that? Like, how young could you make them aware?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could start from as early as you possibly could, just to begin to articulate some of those things on a level that they can understand, depending on what age or stage of development they're at. But with my older son, so his love language is acts of service, so I can let my younger son know, okay, well, he really likes it when you help him with this or this. So maybe if you were able to do that and understand that if he's not hugging you, it doesn't mean he doesn't love you. It's just that he shows it and hears it and understands it in a different way. And having those conversations with them to help them understand one another better, I think is really effective. Yeah.
It sounds like you've had that conversation a couple of times. How about you, Bec? Any in your family able to use that?
I think I remember talking about it recently, and actually the kids getting and doing the test for this to sort of find out what their love languages are. And I mean, just even doing the test promotes that conversation about it, doesn't it? And helping them to recognize not only their own and getting to understand themselves more, but like you're saying, recognize everyone else's in the family as a way of knowing how it is that we can show love to each other. I had, like you said, it was Mother's Day recently, and my daughter prepared a whole day that was an activity we did for me, which was so beautiful. And at the end of the day, I said to her, I feel so loved by that you took the time to organize something for me that was all about me. And so it seems like a bit of a weird way to express an act of service, but I didn't actually have to do any of the organizing, which normally I would. Normally I'd be the one to, plan and organize and decide where we're going and what time and what we need to bring. But all I had to do was get in the car, and she'd sort of planned out this whole day. And so it was so cool to articulate back to her, like, thank you for loving me in a way that feels so loud to me. So yeah, I think it just facilitates conversation, regular conversation all the time about how we're loving each other and why something might impact us in a different way. Like, we said before, our husbands' love languages are words of affirmation. So if a harsh word is spoken, that actually is more painful and hurtful for him than it might be for one of the kids. And so being able to say, oh, when you said that to Dad, that actually was really hurtful for him, that you might not realize because, his love language is words. So just promoting conversation, I think, is really helpful in the home.
Well, you guys, thanks so much for this time together. I wanted to ask you guys, what's the best way? I mean, you guys are Love and Logic trained, and you have this podcast, I Love You Too Much to Argue. How can they find that podcast?
Well, we are on every platform that you would like to get your podcast on. So just search in your favorite podcast app, I Love You Too Much to Argue. We are on Instagram at I Love You Too Much to Argue podcast. And we've got an email address. You can email us, I Love You Too Much to Argue @gmail.com if you'd like to get in touch with us. And our podcast really is all about facilitating different techniques and avenues that you can use in order to help you in your personal relationships in every aspect of your life. So that we cover specifically the Enneagram, love and logic, and love languages, and the way we use those tools in different relationships and how to use it for personal growth, but also enriching every relationship in our life. So we would love to.
Well, you guys are doing awesome. I have listened to a bunch of your podcasts, and I love that you're going in depth. So especially if parents have questions about different ones of the love languages, you have a podcast on acts of service.
Yes.
You have a podcast on quality time. So if they want some more examples and in-depth, there's that on your podcast, as well as in-depth in all the different forms of the Enneagram, if people know what Enneagram is, and all sorts of hints on love and logic. I love what you guys do. Thank you so much for being on my podcast. I'll look forward to continuing to work with you in the future.
Thank you, Mary. It's been an absolute pleasure.